His stuff.
USB 01 connected, and I'm going to take this one off. Okay, so I'm using my Wi-Fi direct to try to make sure we have a good connection.
Hey, Gary.
Hey there. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How's everything in the great? You're still in the great state of Ohio, aren't you?
I don't know if it's a great state, but yeah, I'm still here in Ohio.
Got it. I think Nancy is also gonna Nancy Taylor is also gonna join us. I think Gary, just to pick you up on where I'm picking this up, um, in the workbook section, we had left off my first session at visioning tools.
Okay.
Hey, Linda.
Hi there.
Hello.
Could I ask my dumb question of the day?
Was that just it, or do you want a second one?
Now that we've got this lovely, gorgeous new website, when I pull up Trusted Advisors and click on affiliate login, it automatically takes me to that home page thing, and there's no tab for Learning Labs. So I was confused. I had to go through several machinations to get here.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm probably doing something stupid, but you know,
While folks are signing on, let me check it out for you.
okay.
I can multitask.
Because it doesn't even ask for my login. So apparently it's remembered that, and it just takes me right to the quote unquote home page. But it's like, it's that page that says processes and client forms and that stuff. So I'm not too sure why that's happening.
Mine did that too, Linda.
Oh, thank you. So I'm not the only.
No, I thought it was, when I went to it first, I thought, oh, last time I was there, I didn't sign off. And so it couldn't let me select Learning Labs. And then I signed off, but when I came back in, it wasn't nice. So I just thought it was me, but yeah, I had some kind of issue.
So I had to go through some strange thing. I looked at I pulled up past Learning Labs, and then there was a thing that said upcoming Learning Labs. But on the home page, there's nothing that says, hello, click here for the Learning Labs.
Well, mine has a menu down the left-hand side. When I get on correctly, it has a menu down the left-hand side that I can click on Learning
So
Labs.
maybe from back in the day, I just didn't sign off. Is that the answer to that question?
You might
kind
have
of thought that was me.
caption cookies too, because I just pulled it up on my laptop, which is sitting next to my presentation computer. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth button down on the left-hand navigation is Learning Labs.
I don't even think I have a navigation bar, but I'll check it out. I'll figure it out. And if not,
if you have challenges, you can feel free to call Jenna too.
I will.
Important thing is you're here, Linda.
Say that again, Nancy.
Nancy, I lost you. Nancy, you're frozen, just so you know.
I am?
Yeah, no, not, whoops, what? It just kicked me out.
Okay. No, but Linda,
Linda, you're still on.
Well, I'm not according to this.
That's weird. Yeah, mine's doing weird things with the internet.
Yeah.
I changed, I was on the network here, then I went to my cell phone. It's weird.
You were going to ask me something.
Who was going to ask you? Who, me?
Yeah, you were.
Doug? No, I just said it's a good thing you're on. Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, I was just said it's a good thing you got on, Linda. That's the important thing.
Oh,
You're here.
thanks. Well, it was not easy.
Well, they're just testing our technical capabilities as we.
Oh, dear
moving
God,
into
we
the
all know
world.
I'm technologically challenged, so.
Bob Fritz will be joining us, Doug, in about 30 seconds.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Myers.
Hey, Mike.
Hi all.
Tammy, is Wendy not in the office today?
She's leaving a bit early today to go to her son's football game.
No, I had sent her an email and usually she answers promptly and I didn't hear back from her. So I was just wondering.
Well, she's not leaving the office until I think like 3:30, which is why I'm monitoring today's call. Did you send it this morning or this afternoon?
It was this morning. It was funny, but I sent like 3 different emails and I didn't hear back because maybe I can touch base with her tomorrow. I have a unique opportunity to be in front of a group of executives and managers that are part of the Johns Hopkins medical system.
Wow.
And I got there because I had a conversation with someone about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then when we had a longer conversation, in a way, it kind of reminded me of the story that David had with his hospital system. It's nothing but leadership issues and communications issues and 7 different groups not talking to each other and people from different, some medical backgrounds, some no medical backgrounds. Like, okay, I got 10 minutes. What the heck am I going to do to say, hey, come back and talk to us, you know?
Well, I can just suggest that she gives you a call tomorrow morning in our team meeting.
Okay. I have an idea and I always like to run things by her. And I truly think this can be, if I play it right, an incredibly exciting and large scale opportunity. So I want to make sure I don't screw it up. And I see Doug smiling. Doug might have to help me with this. My sense is, okay, go in there and ask them some questions because they're from all over the place and then lead them to, well, you know, we can come back and talk about this. Doug, what did I see a yes there?
There's a lot of yes in that.
Okay.
Well, we have a team meeting every morning at 9:30. I'll just ask her to give you a call. It'll save you a step.
Okay.
Hey, Tam,
Yeah.
let me make a suggestion. Why don't you go ahead and stop the recording and restart it just so we have a cleaner start for anybody who's going to watch the recording.
Well, Jenna always edits it anyway. So
What? My pearls of wisdom could be left on the cutting room floor? You're telling me that now?
So Douglas,
Poor
there
Doug.
may be some of your pearls of wisdom that wind up on the cutting room floor, as they say.
I'm shocked. I'm outraged. I'm
Oh,
appalled.
yeah, sure.
You'll be hearing from my lawyer.
Yeah.
Jenna would never edit you, Doug. No.
I sent Bob the link 3 minutes ago in the effort of being respectful for those that are here. I would get started, Doug.
All right. So since most of you, if not all of you, were on the call for part 1, we got up to visioning tools in the workbook, which in at least one version starts at about page 8.
Still has that upstairs. Well, food.
And so for me, kind of walking you through some of the questions, I tend to think of what's the scope of the business as kind of another way of that is what's the breadth of the business? You know, how all encompassing is it really trying to be? The right answer to the second question, what does our organization look like, is not tall, dark, and handsome. The right, you know, it's really a matter of kind of talking it through and from a Are you thinking about having a tall organizational structure or a flat organizational structure? Or are you thinking about being singular divisional versus multi-divisional? Those kinds of questions. Who are our customers? That's always interesting because every once in a while, by about this question, you got to come back and go, remember, this is looking out 2 or 3 years from now. This is not answering to who are our customers today. It's who do we envision our customers to be 2 or 3 years or more, depending on the time frame that's been selected. A lot of times I'll ask people if I've had the conversation kind of what constitutes short and long-term goals. A lot of times long-term goals is beyond 5 years. So some of the natural conversations that I have with people everything on this page will be in closer to a 5-year framework, from 5 to 10 year framework versus a shorter frame tends to be in terms of a lot of the client conversations that I have.
Hey, Doug,
Yeah.
for small businesses, which is what we deal with a lot of the time, is it your opinion that maybe we need to shorten that time frame for those people, since their world tends to change a little more dramatically than bigger businesses?
Linda, I'm going to give you a qualified yes. And the
Okay.
qualified yes is if they're in the business, if they're in the B2C business. That to me is a lot different answer than if they're in the B2B business.
Okay.
I don't necessarily shorten it for the B2B business.
No. Right. Okay. That was what I thought. I just wanted your opinion.
I appreciate that. Market and market segments tend to ask people kind of what things do they think about when they think about markets. You know, are they thinking about it purely from a demographics perspective? Are they thinking about it, geographically? Are they thinking about it from a customer type? Are they thinking about it predominantly through different distribution channels? All of those things could be kind of on the table depending on how they anticipate kind of going to market, over the next 2+ years, and how that affects kind of where they're and obviously kind of where they're starting from today, and are they in the middle, of a movement to a different kind of a thing. Size of our organization can be answered by either dollars or people. Most people have thought about it in terms of dollars, particularly since the next question says how many employees do we have. That's been a very interesting question, with everything from, do employees are we considering independent contractors in that mix, or are we talking about purely employees? And what are we expecting to have 2-3 years from now versus where we are today? Those numbers, by the way, could go up or down. If you were a manufacturing company that was getting ready to invest all kinds of technology in robots, your numbers might actually, are you expected to have, kind of as people retire, just not filling the jobs? Don't be surprised if those numbers go down and not necessarily go up. If people are looking at, they used to have their own sales force and they're getting ready to sell more through manufacturers' rep organizations, and so they're not going to need the same headcount that they once needed. Those could be some numbers where numbers going down versus what they have today is legitimate business strategy. I think I told you this. You may have heard this one directly from the horse's mouth, Mr. Slepin. But he was once he was doing a plant tour. And he was walking around with the company president. And just to make casual conversation, he asked the company president, he said, "So how many people work here?" And without hesitation, the company president said, "About 10%. So now we only ask people, how many people do they employ? Where are we physically, geographically located? That used to be a pretty straightforward question for the last year, but now that people are, basically zooming in from all over the place. But where I will have questions on that one is, for example, many, many years ago, one of the things that prompted that question to be built into this segment was I had a client that was in the executive headhunting business, and they wanted to go global. And in those days, in order for them to go global, that meant they needed to have a presence in London, in Hong Kong, and Frankfurt in order to be considered a player in the banking and financial services level at that level. If you'd say, oh yeah, well, we're located in Park Avenue, New York, which they were, 5th and Park, not exactly a low rent district, but it's like, yeah, but if you're competing with global players in financial markets, where are the financial markets around the world? So they knew that they wouldn't be taken seriously if they were trying to recruit people around the world if the closest office they had was 3,000 miles away. So that physical geographic question has led to some interesting discussion. What are we really good at? That's very similar to some of the unique selling proposition questions that you're going to see later on in the discussion. How do we differentiate ourselves from competition? That is always an interesting challenge. And again, you're asking people, how are you going to differentiate people from your competition a couple of years from now? Again, it is so easy for people to answer these questions in present tense instead of in future tense. I'm almost always just kind of reinforcing that this is a visioning tool. This is not a report on present tense. Same thing with the technological advantage. So those are the main pieces in and around the visioning tools questions, in terms of kind of when somebody says, well, what does that mean? That's at least kind of my understanding. If you'll flip the page or following along, now you have the vision statement, kind of the quest. What is it that you really want to become? I've seen various types of visions over the years. I've watched stuff that use all kinds of flowery language. The visions that I actually like the best, quite candidly, tend to be short and pithy, to the point where somebody could actually understand it and, with any luck, remember it. Somebody will say, every once in a while, somebody will say, when I give them a couple of different examples, they'll say, so are you just talking about like an advertising slogan? And I say, no, not necessarily. But it's short enough that people are going to remember it. And I remember when I first started working with Picatinny Arsenal up North Jersey, every file cabinet had literally a full 8.5 by 11 page, and you knew it was seriously because it was, coated in plastic with magnets on the back, that was on the side of every file cabinet, all done in beautiful calligraphy and all this kind of stuff in terms of what the vision was for Picatinny Arsenal, and nobody, including the commanding general, actually knew what it said. That got translated into providing overwhelming firepower for decisive victory, because the business they were in was basically guns, bullets, and fire control systems, and tanks and all this kind of good stuff. Nancy, go ahead. Sorry, I'm going to kill my mail.
Thanks, Doug. The question I have about a vision statement, I'm working with the Baltimore Sister Cities Board of Directors, helping them go through a strategic plan, but rewriting it in the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because in order for us to apply for grants, we have to clearly reflect in everything we do that we do follow those tenets. And the challenge I'm having is some of them have said, okay, we already have this. And it's a very boring, bland thing. I don't know how to emotionally engage them. And I think some of it's fear and some of it is just, I don't want to do the work. But how do I emotionally engage them to really put some effort into recrafting a vision statement?
Nancy, I'm going to see if I can pull something up from my bag of tricks.
Okay, I like tricks.
Do, 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 do. Yeah, it's not there. Let me see. Let me see if I baked it into this version. There was a friend of mine that gave me some languaging on vision and visioning that I really loved in terms of what it was and what it was not, and
I don't, some of them are trying to turn it into more like an intellectual exercise of let me put some words down, as opposed to really crafting the words that have meaning and can drive the organization forward. And I've come across that sometimes in working with smaller companies. They don't know how to do it, so they come up with a very simple intellectual sentence that means really nothing.
That sounds like a great example of that is Jim Gottschall once gave us a handy dandy vision generator. Let me see if I have that one still in my file here. Boy, I'm striking out twice. The handy dandy vision creator. Let me just give me 1 second. Let me just switch books. All right, hang in there with me for 2 seconds while I sit back down. From the archives. This is the handy dandy vision generator. This was from Gottschall in a training session a gazillion years ago.
Would you be able to get us a copy of that, put on the website or something? Tammy, could we get a copy of that?
So that's the first list, and that's the second list.
Okay.
Empowerment employees, highest quality material, best technology. And basically you just take one from each of the 7 columns and you got your vision. For example, down at the bottom, Our vision is to become a world-class leading edge supplier of benchmark level systems for the financial services industry, using self-directed teams in a synergistic fashion to delight our customers, shareholders, and employees. I have no idea I don't remember what the must pass the 10-person rule is.
That doesn't exactly roll off the tongue.
Oh, I agree with that. But I can certainly send that as a kind of as a comedic scan. But but this was the one that I use a lot. And this used to exist in the RAC archives, a powerful vision statement. Tammy, I don't know if you know where that one is in your system or not. I had originally provided this to Linda, but I'd like you to listen to it, even though it's a little timely. This came from my buddy Eric Jackson. A vision statement is a description of a future, not the future, rather a future, a possible future for which you're willing to take a stand and on which you're willing to align as a team. A vision for the future is not a reaction to the past. It's not designed to fix something that's wrong. It's a freestanding creation. And creation is distinct from change. Creation is unencumbered by the past. Vision statements encumbered by the past place immediate limitations on what's possible. It's easy to develop a vision statement. It's difficult to generate a powerful vision statement. Here are some characteristics of a powerful vision statement. A powerful vision statement has clarity. It's tangible and easy to understand. A powerful vision statement is filled with possibilities that do not now exist. It's exuberant and alive. A powerful vision statement gives energy and inspires action. It describes a future worth expending energy for, worth being tired for, worth resolving conflicts for, worth giving part of your life for. A powerful vision statement is generative. It sparks creative ideas and thoughts you didn't have before. It generates ideas for new avenues for action, unexpected possibilities, new relationships, and unanticipated resources. A powerful vision statement describes something that you do not know how to accomplish, and is clearly not going to happen without some extraordinary intervention. A powerful vision statement is not random dreaming. While it's not a reaction to the past or an attempt to fix something that's wrong, it is based in reality. Finally, once formulated, a vision is something that you can return to over and over again to return you to the purpose of your work, to soothe your frustrations, to place your breakdowns in context. The finest, most carefully crafted vision can add joy and purpose to all your efforts. I thought that was just a very, very powerful piece. And so I tend to read that out loud for my clients when we get to that section.
If we could get a copy of that, that would be great, because the language in that, I think, would be of value for the group that I'm working with them, to help them really merge or engage around this concept of the vision statement, because I can tell right now they just don't get it. And that, I think, could be a great tool to use them or to use for them to energize the conversation.
Got it.
Nancy, the only question I have as a PS to that is, the folks that you're dealing with, who are they and how invested are they in what happens to this organization in 5 years? If they're not taking total ownership of this and looking to have this fabulous organization 5 years from now, it's going to be very difficult to tap into their emotions.
That's a good point. And it's an interesting organization in that it's a nonprofit.
Okay,
It's been in existence for 12 years in Baltimore. But what makes it a challenge, if you will, is that we have people who are from completely different cultures. Even though they're based here in the United States, some of them were born here, some of them weren't. We have people from Japan, from China, from Korea, from Liberia, from Germany, and they think and act differently.
right.
The sense is that they are all committed to doing good in the world through Baltimore's sister cities. The challenge the new president has is that in the past, the city committees often competed with each other for money, for resources, and are very content to keep that model going, when in fact, we won't be able to survive as an organization if we continue to allow those stovepipes to exist. So that's right, that's part of the challenge. I think that wording that Doug shared could be some of the wording that the president could use to really encourage them to see the benefits of coalescing as an organization rather than competing individually.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, I can send that along to I can scan it and send it along to Tammy so it can be distributed.
Yeah, we'll get it out. If you can get
Yeah.
it, that would be great.
Yeah, that's a great piece, Doug.
Yeah, again, the only thing on it is it doesn't have Eric's name, so somewhere along the line, even if I have to handwrite it in, I want to make sure that I give him credit, because when he first shared this with me, and this was back literally in 95, 96, I was so struck by it, I went ahead and sent it out to Linda, and then she negotiated with him, and it did get built into some of the languaging that's in the text portion of some of the older versions of the strategic plan. But I'll do that. I just want to make sure that I'm keeping it clean. So on the vision, I try to think about it as based on that one HBR article that most organizations under-communicate their vision by the factor of 10, even if they're doing page check stuffers and town hall meetings and so on. To me, the more convoluted, the more complex the vision, the harder it is to communicate. A lot of times, one that I will use as an example is both what came up as part of the quality initiative with Florida Power and Light. Their vision is power at a flip of a switch. I think that's brilliant, because particularly to my knowledge, when it came up, Florida was adding 50,000 people a month. And when you think about what does it take to keep the power on when you're adding 50,000 more users a month, and you have hurricanes, and you have brush fires, and, right? That's, to have that vision, that's what we're striving for. That to me is pretty cool. You know. And that to me is something then that people can start to operate that way, so it's not just, empty words. But again, people start to think, well, okay, then the other question comes up, well, is the vision for external use or for internal use, right? I mean, people have tried to trap me into that conversation over the years. And it's like, to me, if you know where you're going, why not let the world know that this is kind of what you're signing up to do? So put it up on your website. Why not? Now, when we get down to the intermediate milestones and stuff like that, where we're publishing growth rates and revenue targets and so on, yeah, okay, And in some cases, maybe the mission appears on the website, maybe it doesn't, depending on kind of, is this something that you really want to publish for your own use? But from a vision perspective, in general, I don't see a lot of downside with putting it up on the website and using it as a recruiting tool and everything else that goes along with it. Then we get into the values, section 4.0, or depending on what workbook version you're using. What are we strongly to be true and non-negotiable? Those are really starting to create your core values. And underlying values or principles. And then start, what I love about this next section with our team members, we want to be known as by our team members as, we trust in and value our employees when we want to be known by customers as, suppliers as, stockholders, other people in the community. What I love about those is it really starts to cement what behaviors would have to be in place for that to be a true statement. So it takes it away from just verbiage, if you will, and to me it really makes it come alive, because now you're basically asking the question, how would I know that you're actually living your values? And a lot of times I will ask the question specifically, and you've probably heard me say this before on other calls. If I accused you of living your core values, and I hauled you into court, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Because that, to me, that's where my own style is to become a little bit more combative during the values discussion than any other place. Because what I don't want is kind of words that sound good but really don't have any practical meaning. And if you guys have already heard me kind of talk about on the various calls how much I push back on, do you include the word honesty or don't you? We can just save a couple of minutes if you already know where I'm going on that. So I need some kind of facial expression from most of you. Just give me a thumbs up if you know where I'm going with that question. Okay. 1, 2. Gary's not so sure. And I can't really read Nancy's face on that one. But to me, I almost always talk about situational honesty. Is that really what you're talking about? And I got to admit, when Dave Herdlinger and I were doing Fast Start training together a million years ago, he used to use this as part of his debrief of the ethics, the spiritual and ethics section. On a scale of, he would basically read 4 sentences and then ask people to write down a single number, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And it was like the equivalent of, I'm always honest, I'm usually honest, I'm mostly honest, and I'm not very honest, kind of thing. And almost everybody writes down number 2. Because the first question that I would ask people is, raise your hand if you're really honest. And then I get everybody to raise their hand and say, okay, now let me ask you the second question. So I set it up. I set those bowling pins up so I can knock them down. That's the old rabbit in the hat, and don't pull a rabbit out of a hat without carefully putting one in the first place. But that said, if your answer is number 2, that I'm usually honest, or I'm mostly honest, one of the two. When is it okay for your staff to not be honest with you? And that's usually led to some very interesting discussion. Say, what do you mean? Say, well, you've just told me, based on your numbers, that you're mostly honest, but you're not always honest. So assuming that you're managing your people the same way, are you asking your people to be more honest with you than you're willing to be with them? How do you think that's actually going to work? And so when is it okay for them to not tell you the truth? And then that kind of leads into a whole discussion of, are you practicing situational honesty? Meaning that when it's convenient, you'll be honest, and when it's not convenient, you won't be. I say, are you willing to put that in your values, that we practice situational honesty around here? Because if not, now you're even lying in your values. Because unless you're prepared to walk in, and the example that I usually use is somebody's on the phone. Back in the days when we all used to work together in offices, somebody's on the phone, picks up the phone, and says to Linda, Joe Glotz is on the phone, and Linda hates talking to Joe Glotz. So Linda looks at the person who answers the phone and goes, tell him I'm in a meeting. Even though Linda is clearly not in a meeting. But now all of a sudden you're putting their staff in the position of lying for Linda, because Linda doesn't really want to talk to that person who is on the phone. So now, if you're asking your staff to lie to you, how do you think that squares with the big vision statement that says, honesty and integrity? So I said, don't bother.
So Doug, I think there's more to it than that. I think you have to think about what creates the greatest good. And sometimes what we call white lies or dishonesties are important to accomplish a greater good. And so that's more like integrity than honesty, and kind of slicing it real fine. But we've all been in situations where we chose not to tell the truth just because we didn't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or because we thought the repercussions would be much worse than just ignoring the peccadillo. So I don't know how you address that, but I don't like integrity and honesty and value statements, just because you get wrapped up in all of the details that, I suppose, if you go back far enough, the Pharisees delighted in pecking apart.
Well, and Mike, to your point, that's why a lot of times honesty and integrity will not end up in my clients'
Right.
vision statements, because I ask them, are you really willing to live with that? Don't put it up on the wall if you're not really, unless you're going to call honesty an aspirational value and not a core value. Don't put it on the wall, because you're not really willing to live by it.
Not in the absolute terms. But the other thing, just to kind of be clear about it, is I have an emotional reaction to the words, because I had an employee one time who told me integrity is my highest value, and then walked out of my office and accused me of bigotry. And so I didn't think that was high integrity. And so I've always had this kind of like, So, it's probably an emotional reaction too.
Yeah, talk about an emotional event from Maxwell, a significant emotional event from Maxwell Maltz, right?
Mm-hmm.
Impact learning, no question about it. Yeah, I get it. I get it. But I guess what I'm saying is, I don't roll in this particular section. I don't roll over and play dead when people are starting to put their values up on a screen. I really make sure that they really understand what are you really committing to, and that's why I love that we want to be known as our suppliers by, and we trust our value. We trust our employees because those to me are much closer to observable behaviors. That's why I think that section is so powerful. Let me wrap the rest of you guys into any other thoughts on take yourselves off mute. Any other, except for Gary, because Gary's already off mute. Any other thoughts to either Mike's discussion or mine before I move on to the next section?
No.
Actually, I have a sort of a question. I'm struck by when it talks about we want to be known by our team members as, meaning how do they view us? And then we trust and value our employees when they. Have you found that sometimes you get statements that are kind of diametrically opposed to one another?
I haven't found with the groups that I've been doing. I haven't really found that as a real issue.
Okay.
I'm not committing the fact that I never will, but it's just so
Right.
far it hasn't surfaced that way in my reality.
Well, my thought in asking that was, you could come up with something that says, we want to be known by our team members as, excuse me, Mike, but honest people with great integrity and great empathy and yada, 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 yada. And then to ask management, so to speak, we trust and value our employees when they, and that could be somewhat different. And I just wondered if you had run across that.
Yeah, I haven't seen as much of the double standard surface. Either that or people are not smart enough to play both sides. So now we get into the next section down with his mission. And this is when we're getting into the pieces that kind of describe the how, beginning to describe the how you're going to execute against the vision. And kind of the boundaries. And I got to admit, with the new one, with that piece being built in now, where it's mission and vision, or vision and mission, so that we're not getting into a spitting contest with somebody. Well, how come you're using this language when the rest of the world is using that? That's been a lot easier for me personally, particularly when I've worked with larger organizations where there's a lot of people in the room that this is not their first time ever going through a strategic planning process. When all of a sudden you're using language that's different than the rest of the world uses, it just plays with their head, and in general, not much good comes out of it as far as I'm concerned. So between the vision and the mission and the values, those are the lenses that I'm trying to use to create the context for everything else that we're going to do. That everything else is going to be done through that lens. And that to me is a real distinction that we're making. Let's go into the market, the external assessment, market segments and opportunities. And depending on whether you're using the electronic version or the paper and pencil version, you got a whole different spots for market segments, so that you can slice and dice those answers any way you want. The customer population in a different version, that might be called target market or market segment. I mean, kind of population of that market. So it's, within the people that have headaches, what's that, or migraines, what's that customer population size? Well, there's 42 million people that suffer from headaches, or whatever the case may be. Now, the customer needs is where I start to use my example of drill bit. And this is where just again, a casual shake of your head. If I talk about 1/4-inch drill bits, does that mean something to you? Okay. So this is where I launch that discussion. So I ask people to start defining their customer needs in terms of holes, not drill bits. A lot of times I do not ask them to do a lot of work to fill in that potential volume, last column. And the only reason why I don't is if their market share is 0.0001%. There's so much business out there than they'll ever do. It doesn't matter. If it was Coke versus Pepsi and that potential volume, that would be a meaningful discussion. But I ask people not to engage in kind of an academic paper chase, kind of for no apparent reason. If I'm asking them to answer a question, it's not typically just for the heck of it. It's because I want to go somewhere with the answer to that question. So if it's not useful, I'll typically skip it. The next page gets us into market analysis of competition. Now, that segment discussion should be, with any luck, lifting the same segments that you just had on the previous page, so that you're looking at it with some lens of consistency. The product and service is kind of pretty apparent, but the next one, the competitor line, the competitor column may not be. I happened to be working with a client in Reading many, many years ago, or on the outskirts of Reading, and they happened to build homes. And we got to this section of the strategic plan, and I said to him, "Who do you think your competition is?" And he gave me certain home builders and so on. Interestingly, I made a request that day, and he actually did what I asked him to do, and I had him call local realtors or realtors and banks and lending institutions and ask the question, who do you consider my competition to be? And when I got together with him the following week, it was mind-boggling to him how many names surfaced by talking to Wyomissing realtors, bankers, mortgage lenders that he would have never in a million years considered the names that they gave him as competitors, but he was basically in the housing market. It's like, oh, well, these guys only build 3 homes a year. They're custom home builders, but they're lucky if they build 3 homes a year. That name would have never even surfaced on his list. So I love to give the assignment of, and a lot of times I will pick the business professional and say, would you just pick up the phone? Do you know 5 mortgage originators? Yeah. Would you pick up the phone and call 5 mortgage originators and just ask them, who do you think who do you consider my competition to be? And just shut up and write down what they tell you. Don't argue with them. You're just data gathering. You're not data processing. And that's really been insightful, both INSIGHTFUL and INCITEFUL. It really has been in terms of kind of surfacing stuff that's out there. And then kind of what is their service and so on, and what is our distinct advantage. And again, I ask them to kind of use that idea, if I hauled you into court, would there be enough evidence to prove it? Because what I don't want here is just happy talk. This is not, I'll be the first to admit, this is not usually a feel-good exercise as far as I'm concerned. This is just, hey, where are we? Where are we really? This is not about trying to, believe your own press releases or anything along those lines. It's just really get grounded in what's the reality. And so that kind of leads to some very interesting discussions in those next 3 questions. What are our strengths relative to our competition? What distinguishes us from our competition? But quite candidly, what differentiates our competition from us? And sometimes that's been a really eye-opening discussion. It's also helpful because later on, when we do the SWOT analysis, if all of a sudden one of the differentiations of a competitor is it's just that they're 5 times the size, and therefore they have 5 times the bandwidth to handle a big product, a big project, it's not good or bad. It's just, it is what it is. You can't take on, you can't eat that elephant. You just can't. You don't have the bandwidth to take on that project and live to tell about it. You just can't. So, don't set yourself up to lose, by trying to compete in that market when you're not ready to compete in that market yet. So I try to use that as giving people permission to kind of stay grounded in reality. Again, doesn't mean they can't aspire to do that. And part of this process can be to help them build the plans to do that. But you got to at least be willing to say this is where we find ourselves, at the moment. Same kind of thing in terms of the when we move into the product and service comparison.
Nancy has her hand up.
Thanks.
Yep.
Actually, I just wanted to make maybe a suggestion for either a future learning lab or a part in Power Summit. Listening to these questions, I think many of us make an attempt to rewrite our strategic plan every year like good doobies and probably hit a brick wall when it comes to trying to answer these questions. And so I think it might be value, Doug, if you facilitated a group of us through these questions as to how we view ourselves in the world and how do we differentiate ourselves from others, because the coaching arena is changing. I saw that franchise group called Growth Coach. I sent Wendy an email. I forget how many thousands of new franchisees they want to put out in the marketplace this year. So there's just going to be more and more people up against us. And I think if we are more confident about what makes us different, what value we can bring to the table, I think I would appreciate being part of a group that had a chance to go through an exercise like that.
Thanks,
Nancy. Thank you.
So let me give you the good news and not so good on that. One of the challenges when I've tried to do that kind of work with the network before is there's 2 things that really make that session go sideways. You get people that have already done all that work, and so they're not really interested in kind of revisiting it, so it's boring for them. But the other piece is, even if they're interested in doing the work, think about a room full of high D's and high S's answering these questions. And it truly makes it a real challenge to try to have any kind of walking people through answering the questions in real time. Now, if we only wanted to do it at just thinking kind of in real time here, if we only wanted to do it as a kind of the way I'm doing it right now and opening it up for some discussion in terms of what elements may we want to consider in our answer so that I could keep it moving effectively. As long as people didn't expect that they were going to have the opportunity to write their plan during that session. I've never been able to make that work by having multiple people in a session at the same time. Because who writes for 20 minutes and who writes, 4 words on a bullet point, and they're done and they want to go get some cocktail peanuts. Now I see that we're up at 4 o'clock sharp, so I want to honor your time. Hopefully this has been a little bit helpful. I appreciate you guys coming in for phase 2. I'm willing to continue to put more dates on the calendar. I will leave my blue sticky in my book so that I know where I left off with you guys. If you want to get more time on the calendar, I'm more than willing to do this and walk you through the rest of the process as well. But for now, we probably ought to honor the 4 o'clock commitment.
Sounds good. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
Goodbye, all. See you in a couple
Thanks.
weeks.
So long.